Hello and welcome to Sparkling Autos, where in this week's video I'm going to be using Meguiar's Ultimate Compound Polish and Liquid Wax to try and bring this neglected black Jaguar XF back to life. So the owner of this car has had a few health problems over the last few years and hasn't been able to maintain the car the way he would like to. So in order to keep the appearance of the car in somewhat respectable condition, he's been forced to use the roadside car washes, which, whilst they may improve the appearance of the car short term, using these services do dramatically increase your chances of damaging your clear coat, particularly on a black car where swirls and marring is a lot more noticeable, as you'll see later on in the video. And hopefully by bringing the paintwork in this car back to life a bit, we'll give the owner that motivation to get back to maintaining it the way they want to. Now, prior to polishing the car, the first thing we're going to have to do is wash it and then decontaminate it. There's no point polishing a car with there contaminants on the surface because all you'll do is inflict more damage than you're actually repairing. This isn't going to be a product review on these wash products. I'll just quickly explain what I'm using, why I'm using it, and then we can spend more time later in the video talking about the Meguiar's products and why they're beneficial, particularly for somebody getting into machine polishing for the first time. So if you enjoy the music in this video, it's provided as always by Stu Preston. I'll leave a link to Stu's YouTube page and his Instagram below, and I really would appreciate it if you could go to his YouTube and just give it a subscribe. YouTube subscriptions don't cost anything, but they really do help the channel's progress, and Stu's been a huge help to me getting the channel where it is in such a short space of time, so I'm just trying to give a bit of that help back again. As I explained, I want to scan through this as quickly as we can here. So with the wheels, first thing you want to do is rinse them off. There's no point spraying chemicals on loose debris and dirt that was going to hose off anyway. And then I give it a quick spray with GB Detailing Orbit, which is a non-acidic wheel cleaner, and this should help penetrate the brake dust and other contaminants that are on the wheel. So I'm going to leave that to soak for a minute whilst I clean the tyres. For this particular job, I prefer to use an APC. This is Bilt Hamber's Surfex HD diluted at 1:9, which is a fairly strong mixture. However, I knew going into this that the tyres hadn't been properly scrubbed for a while and it was going to take 3 or 4 hits. That's why I've gone in a bit stronger. You can get dedicated tyre cleaners, I have no issue with those. It's just something I haven't tried yet myself. I find the APC does a good enough job and it only costs a few pence. So after scrubbing the tyres a couple of times, I'll give them and the wheel a good rinse out, making sure to remove all the product including all the wheel cleaner, and as you can see the wheel itself is pretty much clean at this stage, but I could see from the foam the last time that the tyre itself could still do with another couple of hits. So we'll go back around again. The only reason we do this with the tyres is if you're going to apply any sort of tyre dressing or treatment at the end, you want the surface to be as clean as possible. Otherwise you're just applying product on top of dirt. You wouldn't do that with your paintwork, so why do it with your tyres? As for the wheels themselves, I have a bucket filled with Gary's Therapy wheel shampoo and a few various brushes, so I'm going to go in and do the face of the wheels first of all, and then go in and clean the barrels out, then around the wheel nuts, and finally cleaning the arches. Again, I'm not going to go into this great detail, we'll fast forward through it and show you quick before and after the wheels, and we'll get on to the bodywork. Given that this is a decontamination wash before we actually machine polish, and once I figured how to adjust the foam lands properly, we want to cover the car with a decontamination shampoo. Now the best one I have used is Gary's Therapy's Zero Decon Shampoo. This isn't a product you would use as part of a regular maintenance wash. This is something you use when you're wanting to remove any remnants of protection that was on the vehicle. So we spray it on, leave it to dwell for around 5 minutes or so, depending on the temperature, and remove accordingly. As I've mentioned in most videos, I prefer to rinse the car from the bottom to top. It's my personal preference, you do what works for you. Now what you will notice at the wheels here are the detail guards. I've mentioned these in my previous video, but I'll just show you how they actually work here. And it really is quite simple. They're just designed to feed the hose down onto a roller and stop it snagging in the tyres. Something which I'm sure most of you will agree can be very frustrating, particularly when it causes the hose to kink up, which will actually shorten the life of it. So really, if you spend a couple of pounds on these, you could save yourself money in the long term, as well as a lot of frustration when you're washing the car. If you are interested, I'll leave a link in the description below. On to the actual wash stage, and again I'm using the Garage Therapy Zero Decon shampoo for the same reason I've used it as the pre-wash. We're trying to remove any protection that's left on the vehicle and take as much contamination off as possible, and in that regard this is one of the best products that I've used for this. But as I've said, this is not a product review. I just want to get the car cleaned, get it decontaminated, and get it into the garage and ready for polishing. Something else I've mentioned before which I like to do is use a separate cloth for separate areas of the car. So one for the roof, bonnet and tailgate, one for my glass like you can see me using here, one for the wings, upper halves of the doors, rear quarter panels, and another one for the lower parts of the car and the bumpers. And once you've finished washing those areas with the mitts, you can go in with your soft detailing brush and either a bit of APC or some shampoo diluted in a foamer and clean around your badges, your grills, window seals, all those sorts of areas that you won't get at with a mint. Once you've all those jobs done, it's time to rinse off again. Now, it may look like I'm in Florida or somewhere here going by the background, but trust me, it was not. It was about 3-4 degrees when I'm doing this. Just about on the limit of where you would actually want to be detailing the car. Now on to the chemical decontamination. For this I'm using Bilt Hamber's Corosol, a fallout remover with a very good reputation, and what I'm going to do once I've covered the vehicle in it is then overlay that with Bilt Hamber's Auto Foam. This will just give the fallout remover a better dwelling time. Because one thing you don't want to do with a fallout remover is let them dry into the car. Not the easiest thing to remove once you've let them dry on. So after dwelling for 5 to 10 minutes, which is perfectly acceptable in these sorts of temperatures, I then thoroughly rinse the car off again. Now the eagle-eyed viewers will notice I'm using the green nozzle here as opposed to the white one I would normally use for rinsing the bodywork. That's because I want to ensure that I get all of this product off. There's not just the foam, there is the fallout remover underneath. You do want to make sure you remove it all, as I've said. The next stage was to go around and remove all the tar from the vehicle, which I did off camera, as to be honest, removing tar from a black car in these type of lighting conditions, filming that wouldn't be of any benefit to anybody really. And then I blanket the car in foam one more time. The reason for this is to basically be used as a lubricant for the cleaning process. Now when it comes to clay, people have their own preferences. Some people use water, some people use dedicated clay lubricants. Personally speaking, I just use whatever shampoo I have to hand or a bit of foam. It doesn't really matter as long as you're lubricating the clay mitt or bar against the surface of the paintwork, as it's never advisable to try and go in dry. Never want to miss an opportunity for a bit of slow motion snow foam. I'm actually using Bilt Hamber's Auto Foam here, which has a reputation of not being a very thick snow foam, but as you can see using it in my new MJJC Lance, which I'll be doing a video on very shortly, it does foam up pretty thickly. Thickly is not even a word, but that's how much it foams up. The final part in the decontamination stage then is the claying process, which I'm just using a clay mitt for, as to be perfectly honest, the paintwork wasn't as bad as I expected it to be. There were a few parts on the lower sections of the car where I did have to use an actual clay bar, but for most of it I was able to do it with a clay mitt. The reason I prefer using the mitt is you get a larger area coverage in one go, which as well as saving time, it also means you're not being unnecessarily harsh on the paintwork. So that's the decontamination complete. Just rinse the vehicle off, dry it off properly, and if you're fortunate enough to have a garage, put it in there. Which I was in this situation, and I also had the luxurious position of being able to leave the car overnight. Now if you're unsure what swirl marks are, or why we're always saying not to go near your roadside car washes, this is why. This is the result. What looks like circles in your paint, they're actually just scratches and scores going in all different directions, but they're just reflecting the point of light back, which is why they appear as circles, hence swirl marks. So how can you avoid this happening to your paintwork? Well, number one is don't go to a roadside car wash. It may seem like the cheap option and a quick fix, but it's not. As you can see, it's doing long-term damage to your paint, because every time you have to polish this out, you're taking another layer off your clear coat. As for the automated car washes in the filling station, I'd like to think if you're even watching a video like this, you'd just know to avoid those at all costs. And the best way to avoid this happening, particularly if you're washing your car from home, is to adopt a safe wash method, which would involve a good thorough pre-rinse and using two buckets to actually wash the car. One for your soap or shampoo solution and the other one for rinsing out your mitts in between each panel. Yes, these methods can add time onto your wash process, but they will save you a lot of hassle in the long run, particularly if you're not confident to do the machine polishing yourself and you have to pay somebody to actually correct your paint. The last stage before we actually start the polishing is to prepare the car. So that means taping up the bits that you don't want the polish to hit, i.e. round rubber seals, door trims, etc. Now this doesn't need to be a neat job. I wouldn't spend too long doing this, depending on how detailed you're going to be with your polishing. If you're doing a full paint correction and you're getting into every corner, nook and cranny, then yes, you'll want to spend a lot more time. But for the purposes of this demonstration, I don't need to do that. The other thing is, on this car there's not a lot of black plastic trim. Everything's a painted surface, which isn't going to be affected by me going over it with the polisher. So I'm just going to cover around the wipers and the door edges very crudely and just get on with the job of polishing the car. Finally then was just to very lightly go over the car with a panel wipe. This is just to remove any dust that may have settled on the car overnight while it was in the garage. First up in the polishing process is the Meguiar's Ultimate Compound. And why have I chosen this product? Well, basically when I first got into machine polishing, this was the range that I learned to do it with. It's very user friendly, very simple range to understand, and the sort of product you'd be hard pushed to actually make a mistake with and do any damage. So you start off by priming the pad, which I did off camera, and then you'll spread the product around quickly. You can do that with the machine on a slow speed, before you crank the speed up a bit and proceed with your first set. Now, When I say crank the speed up, you don't need to go up to full speed straight away, particularly if you're starting off. Most of your entry level dual action polishers will have a speed range of 1 to 6, 6 obviously being the maximum speed. Generally I would start off about 4 to 4.5 when I'm cutting. Another thing to remember is depending on which stage you're at. So when you're at the cutting stage, you should be spinning fast and moving slow, and then as you gradually work down you go the opposite way. So your polishing stage, you can spin at a medium speed and move at a medium speed, and if you're applying your protection by the machine, you want to spin it slow and move it fast. Now the reason for that, if it's not obvious, is your cutting compound is the one that's doing all the work. It's called a cutting compound for a reason. What it's doing is actually cutting into the clear coat and leveling it off, thus reducing the appearances of the scratches. So basically the heavier the compound, the more effect it's going to have on the paint defects. And this is where you need to manage your expectations. Products like this are great to get into machine polishing. You can't do a lot of damage because they don't have a lot of cut, but they do have enough to make a difference and let you see what you're doing and how it's doing it. But what you shouldn't expect is to pick up a bottle of this at your local DIY store or wherever you buy it and use your entry level DA polisher and expect to get a glass like finish on your paint, the likes of what you would see at a professional car show. That's not going to happen, and you have to be realistic about how far you can actually go with these types of compounds. But what you can do, and what these are very good at, is reducing your swirls and taking away minor scratches, which certainly boosts your confidence when it comes to machine polishing. Some of the products I use now that I'm a bit more experienced at this, they may cut a lot faster, but that then leads to its own problems, where if you don't know what you're doing, you can cut too far and get through the clear coat quicker than you expected to. On the subject of which, another piece of equipment you'll want to invest in if you're going to begin into machine polishing is a paint depth gauge. Now these can be something cheap to start off with, but it's something I would definitely recommend getting if you're going to do this. Particularly if you're going to be working on other people's cars. It's bad enough damaging your own paintwork, but if you're going to damage somebody else's car, they may not be too happy about it. Especially if it's something that's avoidable, when all you have to do is a quick check first of all before you start polishing. Now, I know it may seem ironic telling you to do that without actually showing you the footage of it. However, I did have a technical issue with that particular piece of footage, and I'm not able to show it here, but I will do it in future videos. So I've set up a few shots here where you can actually see the compound at work. This first one here on the near side of the boot lid, where you just see the swirls around the point of light there. And you bear with me a second while I knock the camera out of the way and try to fix it. And just give the machine a couple of passes over. I'm going to speed up the footage a bit, and even as I buff it away, before I've used any finishing polish, so you can see in this live, and you can see the difference it makes straight away. And here we are then. So as I buff away the polish residue, you can see around that point of light where the swirl marks have disappeared. Now there is hazing around it. The hazing will disappear when we come to the next stage, but for now we just want to focus on the actual swirl marks, the scratches, the lighter defects on the paint, as you can see here, have basically gone. They've been machined out. Now yes, if you focus closely on the compounded side, you will still see a few minor scratches that are just slightly deeper than the swirl marks. You're not going to get these out with this type of compound on one pass. You may eventually get them out, but again, this goes back to managing expectations. You can't chase perfection the first time you do this. Start off light, get rid of the minor stuff, and then go back if need be. But bear in mind, when you're using a focused light like this in a dark environment, you're always going to see something. So now we come to a slightly different type of defect, just a scratch on the door, possibly from somebody maybe with a watch or a ring reaching for the door handle. And we're going to go over it again, same process. And once again you'll see the difference at the end, and I'll actually show it before and after in this one because it didn't knock the camera out of the way. So as you can see here, as I fade in the before and after pictures, you can see that it disappears, and it's not just that one scratch above the light. If you look just to the left of the door handle, you'll see another couple of scratches which again have been buffed out. Another good habit to get into is cleaning out your pad between sets. Now some people do it every set, I tend to do it every second or third. Ideally this is much easier with an airline, but if you don't have access to one, a toothbrush is fine. Just put the machine on speed and go over it lightly with the brush. When you're doing this for the first time, you might feel the inclination to actually push down on the machine polisher, but that's not necessary. As you can see here, there's no pressure at all needed. Your forward hand at the top of the machine is purely to guide the machine in the right direction. You don't need to apply any pressure, the weight of the machine is enough to do the cutting. In fact, with the dual action it's actually advised not to, because you can cause the machine to stall. So just to highlight what we actually mean by the machine stalling, that's when the free spinning end stops turning. And you'll see here, if we go up the raised edge of the bonnet, if you push too close to the edge, it won't spin anymore. Again, the only way to avoid that is come away, take the pressure off the machine and let it build up its momentum again. Dual action polishers like to be polishing on a flat surface. They don't like raised edges, so do be very careful when you're going over recesses and things like that. So back to the defects then. The third common type of defect you're going to get is etching, usually from bird poo or tree sap. And again, it's removed in the same way, but once again, manage expectations. You may not get it out first time around, but don't try to do it in one go. If it takes 2 or 3 attempts, then by all means have 2 or 3 attempts at it. Don't try to do it in one go, because as I'll show you here, deliberately I might add, is if you try to do too much in one go, what you'll do is actually overheat the compound and dry it out, which generally is easily identifiable, as you'll notice what you call dusting. You basically see dry compound appearing on the panel, but it doesn't always happen like this. Sometimes the paint will start to look like this, and that's when you realise you've gone too far. Now, I've done this for demonstration purposes, knowing what would happen. As you can see here, it doesn't actually leave any permanent defects. But if you were to continue when it's starting to go like that, you're overheating your pad, you're overheating your clear coat, and that's when you could start leading to problems. Now, as you will see here, the original etching mark, which was sort of at the top centre, there is still a trace of it there, because as I've said, you're not always going to get something away first time, and neither should you try to. So at this stage in the video, we're getting ready to move on to the Meguiar's Ultimate Polish, which will refine what the compound has done and also start to bring back that deep gloss and sharp reflection that the swirl marks have taken away from the paintwork. So to demonstrate this, I've split the bonnet into 2 sections. One side, first of all, I'm going to go over it with the Ultimate Compound, and then once that's buffed off, go over it again with the Ultimate Polish, which will refine the work that the compound has done and give the car back that rich gloss and sharp reflection that the swirl marks have taken away from it. And then once we've taken the tape off and cleaned the 2 sides up, we'll be able to see the difference. To apply the Ultimate Polish, I've gone down to a medium pad. Now you can use a softer pad for this, however I want to keep the softest finishing pad for the liquid wax. For the polishing stage, I still want a bit of bite, I suppose would be the right word, because I'm still trying to remove the haze marks left by the compound. And don't do what I'm doing here, trying to adjust the speed of the machine while it's switched on and on the panel, because you can end up getting yourself into all sorts of difficulties or causing all kinds of damage. Also remember what I said at the start of the polishing process, that when it comes to the polishing stage as opposed to the compounding, you want the machine to spin slower and you can move it faster. Because remember, the machine, the pad and even the product itself, they're not doing as much work at this stage. This is just a finishing process to get the colour back, to get the life back of the paint. You shouldn't even need to do as many passes as I'm doing here. This is purely for demonstration purposes, but going in each direction 2 times is more than enough when it comes to the polishing stage. Always remember as well, if you're going to be machine polishing, it's generally a process that's going to take a lot more than 30 or 40 minutes. So bring ear defenders or earphones. Because all machine polishers, particularly the ones at the lower end of the budget, they do make a lot of noise and prolonged use could lead to hearing damage. So just better safe than sorry. So now that we're finished buffing off the Ultimate Polish, let's get the bonnet cleaned down with the panel wipe and we'll have a look and compare the 2 sides just to see how much difference it has made. As you can see here, it's not always easy to get the right camera angle. You can definitely see a difference between the 2 sides. There's a huge difference. It has really just revived the paintwork. You don't realise how bad the paintwork is on a car until you do machine polish it and you start to see a difference like this. Kind of makes all that effort worthwhile, to be honest. Now, is the right hand side perfect? No, of course it's not. You're not going to get perfection at this stage, but it is a massive improvement, as you can see here in the close-up shot in the dark as well. You can just see that metallic flake just coming back to life. It's really popping out of the paint now, whereas before it's all grey, it's hazed, it's all very dull. So yep, massive improvement. Now we can proceed with the rest of the car. So a couple of things to note: because you're actually spinning the machine at a slower speed and you're moving it faster, it's generating a lot less heat, which means you can double your work area. I know I made that sound a lot more complicated than it needs to be, but just think of it this way: heat is generated by friction, and because you're spinning slower and moving faster, there's a lot less friction. And one last thing I want to point out here, and then I might stop talking for a minute, is when you're doing the roof. A lot of people think the roof is one of the easiest panels to do because it's big and flat. The problem with the roof skin is, on some cars in particular, it can be very soft, and when you've got the weight of the machine burned down and it's flexing, it starts to create a lot more vibration, a lot more noise. Just something to be aware of. And I'm back again. I couldn't stay quiet for too long. The other thing I wanted to add is, if you're going to be doing this, particularly if you are in a garage, but if you're outside in a tarmac driveway, it would work as well, is to have a movable stool or seat of some sort. Now, you can go to some expense with some of these. Some have trays underneath to keep your parts in and all the rest. This is just a hairdresser stool I picked up on Amazon for a few pound. Not very expensive, but makes a heck of a difference rather than sitting on your knees trying to machine polish doors. And it means you can roll back and forward as you're doing the panel. I suppose the only other question remains is, what is the ultimate polish like to buff off? Well, like most Meguiar's products, it's an absolute dream to buff off. It just comes off with no effort whatsoever, and the paintwork feels great to touch afterwards. You could just buff it all day, to be perfectly honest. The last thing to do then before we apply the protection to the car is to wipe it down, and this is just to cleanse the surface of any polish residue, any oils, so that the protection can get the maximum bondage onto the bodywork, because the better it bonds, then the longer it's going to last. You can buy designated panel wipes for this, but I just make up my own with 20% roughly IPA, about 75% distilled water or deionized water, and roughly 5% Surfex HD, just to give that a little bit of cleanability. Now, in the summer months you could just spray this on, and because of the alcohol content, just wipe it over with one cloth and it'll flash away. But this time of year, because it is a bit cooler, I tend to spread it with one and then buff it off with another cloth. It just speeds the process up a little bit. I've heard some people don't like doing this when they've used a glaze polish before they're applying a protection, but to be honest, when it's only a 20% IPA, it's not going to remove all that product. It's just going to take that sort of upper layer of it, just the residue that you don't want the protection bonded to. You want the protection to bond to the bodywork. And carry this out just as if you're applying a quick detailer. Just go around one panel at a time and buff it off, and then by the time you're finished, you're ready to start applying your protection. Now we're on to the final stage, which is the Meguiar's Ultimate Liquid Wax. And as you can see here, I'm just priming the pad, but even then it's probably still too much. As with most waxes, a little goes a long way with this, but I just force to have it if I'm using the machine is to prime the pad as best I can. Now for most people, myself included, applying your protection by a machine is a very strange process. It doesn't feel natural in some ways, but at the same time there are advantages to it, one of which is time. You can spread this product across every panel in the car very quickly. And as I also mentioned with doing the ultimate polish stage, because you're out an even thinner product again, you just keep the machine on the slow speed and you can work the machine very fast. You're not trying to work the product into the bodywork, all you're doing is coating the bodywork with it and then leaving it to dry. And because you're using a very soft pad, going at a very slow speed and moving the machine very quickly across the panel, you're not really generating any heat at all, meaning you can cover as much of the panel in one go, basically as far as you can reach. The likes of the roof, you can do the entire one side of the roof in one go. The bonnet, you can do the entire bonnet in one go if you can reach the whole way into the middle of the bonnet. Because you just have to remember that all you're going for here with the protection is coverage. Just get it on the car and leave it to cure. If you don't have a machine polisher or you're just not quite comfortable using one, all three of these products can also be applied by hand. In terms of the liquid wax, I imagine the results are going to be the same, the only thing you're losing out is time. But with the ultimate compound and the ultimate polish, obviously the machine you are going to get a better result with. But they can be used by hand and they are reasonably effective by hand, just not to the same extent. And the ultimate liquid wax also comes in a paste form, which funnily enough is called Ultimate Paste Wax. It's a product I've never used, so I can't comment on it too much, but to the best of my knowledge, the results are supposed to be the same in terms of durability. Obviously, the application of a paste wax is slightly different. Some people like doing them, some don't. I do actually like using paste wax, but for the purposes of demonstration here, I'm going with the liquid wax and applying it by the machine. So what about the wax itself? Well, according to Meguiar's, it is a pure synthetic hydrophobic wax, offering the longest lasting protection. Use synthetic polymers cross-linked to form a protective barrier that amplifies reflections for incredible depth and mirror-like shine, without leaving white residue on plastic and rubber. Interestingly, Meguiar's also say that you can actually apply this in full sun. Now where I live, we only get full sun one and a half weeks of the year, so it's not really a big issue for us, but it is good to know that you can actually apply this in sunlight. Of course, whether you do or not is entirely up to you. So in terms of how long to leave the liquid wax before buffing it off, it doesn't say specifically, but it does use Meguiar's thin film technology, which means it doesn't turn to a haze as such, but you'll just, if you do a swipe test with your finger and it's dry, then it's ready to buff off. This time of year, again, because of the cooler temperatures, it does no harm to leave it as long as you really want to. So what I'm going to do here is take all this tape off and go and get myself a cup of tea and come back out and buff it off. So after leaving the car for about 30 minutes or so, I came out to buff it off. Now what you will find if you use the liquid wax is it doesn't leave a normal white haze like most waxes do, but the product is definitely visible, and when it comes to buffing it off, I can honestly say it removes easier than any wax I've ever used. Now I know obviously it's a liquid wax, it's not a paste, but even at that, it comes off with absolutely no effort whatsoever. And it leaves one of those finishes that when you're buffing it off, you just want to keep rubbing the panel with the cloth. In terms of durability, the website doesn't say specifically, it does just say long lasting. But in the FAQ section on Meguiar's website, it does say that you should wax the car every 3 or 4 months, so I suppose that would give it a 3 to 4 months durability. Which, given how easy it is to apply and remove the liquid wax, I think 3 to 4 months is pretty good. But in terms of the finish, as you're about to see in the shots at the end here, it has left the car looking very, very glossy, and combined with what the polishes have done in terms of the swirl removal, it's left the car looking really rich again. And just to mention the other products I've used to finish this car off, the glass was cleaned with Angel Wax Vision and then topped off with GB Detailing Vitro Sealed Glass Sealant, which was the first time I've used this. Very, very easy to apply, but I can't obviously talk about durability yet because I don't know. The tyres were coated with Gary's Therapy Tire Serum, which isn't a tyre dressing, it's actually a tyre conditioner. But there'll be a lot more to come about that on the channel in the very near future, as it's more of a long-term product, not just something you throw on the tyres to make them look good for photographs. Anyway, there's not much more I can say about this. That's me finished. I will let you look at the finished shots and just ask you to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And if you've made it this far, thank you very much and take care.